Hi, everyone. My name is Ajmain Yamin. I'm the president of Math Club. Today, we're having a panel all about graduate school, specifically math graduate school. So we have several panelists who are currently PhD students at Stony Brook, and also one panelist who is a PhD student, but not at Stony Brook. I'll let each of them introduce themselves, but before that, let me just say a few words about the structure of the panel. So the panel is going to be 60 minutes long, so an hour long. So if we started at 8:05, we're going to try to end at 9. Yeah, just end at 9. So I have a few prepared questions, and if you guys in the audience have questions, you can ask them in the chat. Our Vice President, Julian Michelle, will get to those questions and voice them when the time is appropriate. Right. Okay. The last 10 minutes will also be reserved for audience questions. Okay. Some panelists also express desire not to be recorded so as not to hold back more honest pieces of advice. So if any of the panelists, one of you panelists, want to say something and not have it recorded, because we are going to record this and put it on our YouTube channel. If you don't want something to be recorded, just say so, and then we will pause the recording. So Spencer will do that. So that part won't be recorded. So without further ado, let's start the panel. Any of the panelists can just volunteer to introduce themselves, and then we'll go from there.
I can start. I think, first of all, if other people want to turn on their video, I'd be happy to be able to see who else is here and I don't know, see if people are following along. I'll assume if you're following along if you don't want to turn your video on, but I would encourage that. So I'm Tim. I am a fourth year now here at Stony Brook, which means I'm officially old. And I went to undergrad at Oklahoma State, which is, I think, about similar as far as the size of their undergraduate program. But definitely a bit of a smaller math department. I started as an engineering student, actually, and I became a math major only in the beginning of my junior year. And I didn't even I think during my junior year, I started thinking a little bit about grad school, not necessarily not right away necessarily, but just started crossing my mind. And then I didn't know, I didn't really decide I would do grad school until the fall of my senior year. And that's when I started taking some of the classes that were sort of joint undergrad and grad school classes. So yeah, I think how deep should how deep should I go in this sort of introduction to myself?
I mean, I think that was great.
Okay, so I should just stop there.
If you have anything else you want to say about yourself, then just feel free.
Okay, I'll just also say that, one thing that I wrote down in my notes for this meeting is that, so when I was looking at applying to graduate schools, I did not feel like I was very qualified. Felt like and I'd just become a math major my junior year. And I sort of felt like I was sort of meeting the bare minimum. So I was pretty nervous. So I almost applied to this post-bac program at the school, which was Wash U in St. Louis. I ended up opting not to. I ended up actually applying there for their PhD program and was accepted. And I only bring this up because I want to say, if you're nervous about applying or if you feel underqualified, don't let that stop you from applying to programs like across the spectrum as far as like math grad schools, if grad school is something you want to do. Because I think that's probably not like, I'm probably not alone in thinking that I was maybe not qualified or, nervous. And then the last thing I'll say is that now that I'm here, what I study is complex dynamics. And I can talk about that if people want to, but I can also not. So.
Great, thank you. Anyone else can volunteer to introduce themselves?
I just joined the meeting, so I'm not quite sure where we're at.
Okay, so we're doing introductions right now. So, yeah. So if you want to, so please, panelists, please introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm a third-year grad student. I did my undergrad at the College of William and Mary in Virginia as a double major in math and economics. I had a sort of similar thing where math wasn't my focus until sort of later in my undergraduate years, and had a similar feeling to what Tim described going into applying to grad schools. But so far, things have been fine. I mean, grad school is hard, so it's hard to describe, but I will say that my feeling of maybe being a bit behind was not a factor so much in being able to get into grad school, and I've been able to do fine so far. Yeah, currently I'm working in complex geometry.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Karina Cho. I'm a second-year PhD student at Stony Brook. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I did my undergrad at Harvey Mudd College, which is a pretty tiny STEM-focused liberal arts college in California. And I majored in math and did a concentration in art there. So yeah, I applied to grad school my senior year of college, and I'm a NSF GRFP recipient, so I didn't teach last year, but this is my first year teaching, and I'm teaching Calc A right now, and it's pretty fun. So I'm basically at the part of my graduate career where I just passed comps, which are the comprehensive exams, in August, but I haven't found an advisor yet, so I don't really know what I'm doing with my life right now, but we're all figuring it out. My mathematical interests are shapes and algebra, which is, I know, like pretty broad, and I haven't exactly decided what I want to do with it, so we'll see what happens, I guess, and I look forward to talking with you all more.
Hey, Karina, what did you say your concentration was? Just out of curiosity.
Oh, I did a concentration in art.
Oh, very cool.
Thanks.
Okay, I'm Brandon. I just graduated from Stony Brook. I'm now a grad student at the University of Maryland, College Park. So University of Maryland, it's like a SUNY system. So it's like there's a bunch of schools statewide. So I'm at the one in College Park, which I think is the most well known. I don't know. I kind of I got into math in high school, and then I showed up to college, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna keep doing math, and I'm here now, basically. So I guess nothing has really changed except for my interests, which have been like all over the place during undergrad, at least. But right now, they are like pretty narrowed down in addition to like the people I want to work with. Um, so I like dynamics and geometry. Um, More geometry than dynamics, I guess. Um, so yeah.
All right, thanks. Thanks everyone. And Brandon was also previous president of Math Club, so yeah. Okay, so the first question I have is, why did you decide to go to grad school instead of some other alternative, say opposed to industry or whatever?
I don't know anything else.
As a counterpoint, or not counterpoint, but I actually was in industry before going to grad school. In between my undergrad and getting accepted to grad programs, I worked for a year at an economics consulting firm, and previously had done internships in, or had jobs in various fields, and didn't like it. I certainly make a lot less money now than I did in that year, but I like the freedom of choice that grad school offers, in that you're able to choose what you are working on, and it definitely rewards people who want to focus and work really hard on something, whereas the same is not true in a corporate world necessarily, and that just didn't fit for me personally.
I think for me, graduate school, fun is not the right word, but I really liked my math courses, like the courses I was taking, the stuff I was learning. I thought it was like really cool stuff. It like, I don't know, it scratched an itch that I had per se. And so I kind of wanted to like continue doing that. This is sort of going beyond the question a little bit, but when I was entering graduate school, I was sort of thinking like, I really looked up to my professors, or at least most of them, or some of them, uh, in undergrad. And I think when I was applying to graduate school, I was sort of expecting that I would probably, like down the line, try to go into academia. And I'll just mention this, that I've like since shifted that. I also thought I was going to go into algebraic geometry, which is like a totally different, like opposite side of the spectrum field almost. Well, I mean, I'm doing stuff that's very different than what I thought I might be doing mathematically when I entered grad school. So you don't have to know what you want to do. But I want to wrap this up. This past summer, I did an internship with a company. It's sort of like a data science company. And now I expect to not go in the academia route. I expect to go into industry after I graduate.
I feel like I'm probably in a similar boat as Brandon. I am a huge nerd and I don't have a lot of other applicable skills. I did some research in undergrad and I really enjoyed all of it. And I was like, yes, I need more. So I'm here now.
So yeah, so last night at industry panel, we saw several people who did math PhDs and planned for industry, like shifting instead of an academic route going into industry in their last years. So Tim mentioned this, but have any of you thought of these sorts of alternative routes, or instead of academic, some other type of career field? Have you guys thought about this? And if so, like, can you talk about it?
I have thought about it in the sense that it was my intention before I intended to get a math PhD. I am now pretty convinced that I want to try to go into academia. But I also think that there are a lot of benefits you have with an industry career that if I am not able to get an academic job, I won't necessarily be like heartbroken to go into industry. Like, there are a lot of advantages to industry over academia, but right now I would prefer to try to go the academic route first.
I think I definitely came into grad school really hoping to get into academia someday. And I think in the past year, and specifically in the past few months, actually, I've been kind of wondering if that's actually like a good fit for me, and B, like something that like they would actually let me do, because it seems to be pretty competitive. So yeah, I guess I would be interested to hear if other people have better advice about industry jobs, because I have no experience in that field.
So like whether I wanted to go into math or not kind of depended on my mood throughout undergrad. So there were definitely like a lot of times where I felt like really burnt out, and I was like, this is absolutely not for me. And then pretty soon after, I was like, okay, I guess I'm just gonna keep taking math classes. And then eventually, I think it was like around spring of my junior year when I was finally like, okay, like I'm gonna do math, or like academia type stuff. But yeah, like spring of junior year was like my last chance to pick what I wanted to do, because at that point, like I either had to really focus on like applied math, which I'd taken a bunch of classes too, or pure math. And so like I picked pure math, and I did research that summer, which like I thought was pretty cool. So kind of made me think that like, okay, going into academia might not be so bad. But there's definitely like other stuff I've been thinking about. Like, I mean, I like really like cooking, for example, and I'm good at it. So I would not be opposed to going like to culinary school and then making like $5 an hour as a chef or something, right? I don't know, and like I wouldn't even be upset. I'd probably be like even more broke than I am as a grad student, but I'd probably be like pretty happy too. So, just whatever happens, happens.
Okay. So,
Actually, I think someone asked a while ago in the chat that I think is like kind of a good thing to answer, because as a couple people mentioned it, like, did you do any research as an undergrad, and like did that help in any way?
help in what sense? Help getting into grad school, or help forming your interests, or just a general help?
The question just says a general help.
Okay.
So my research, I mean, I'm sure to some extent it's a really nice CV line for when you apply to grad schools, but it's also pretty good at having you figure out like what you like and what you don't like. Because if you spend 8 weeks doing dynamics and you are miserable the whole time, then it probably gives you an idea of, I'm not going to apply to schools that only do dynamics. So But yeah, as far as getting into grad school, it's like research is not a prerequisite to entry. Like I know a bunch of people that didn't do research that are in my cohort. But I mean, like, it doesn't hurt.
So I did do research in undergrad. I think on the question of like, does it help? I mean, it could help let you know, like, if you want to go to grad school, because, and that's sort of like, that was my motivation for wanting to do research in undergrad, was that like, if I were to go to grad school, this is the sort of stuff I would be doing. So I wanted to get as much experience as I could to know, like, will this be for me? And then I'll just point out in the chat that the person who's asking clarified that they're asking, does this help you get into grad school? So back to what I was saying is that, so my motivation was that I wanted to know if this was something that I enjoyed and would want to like do more of. And my experience was yes. That's how I felt. As far as did it help you get into grad school, it definitely didn't hurt. I think that for graduate school, your letters of recommendation are important. Maybe the most important. Okay, Emily's nodding her head. And I think for me, one of the ways that I was able to help get at least one good letter of recommendation was by doing research. And so the person that I researched with wrote a letter of recommendation for me. And so I think even if you're not doing research, because doing research in undergrad can be difficult, and it just sort of, I think, can depend on, you know, what professors you have relationships with, and are there professors that have projects that you can work on? So even if you can't do research as an undergrad, developing relationships with professors that are centered around like your mathematical journey is a very good thing if you're interested in pursuing grad school or think you might be.
I definitely agree with what Tim's saying about your letters of rec being the most important thing. And I've found that like talking to people who do admissions, they do seem to say that that is the thing that they trust the most. Cause like, I don't know, I guess you have to write your own personal statements, but they probably trust like an actual mathematician more than you. So at least for me, it was in terms of research, I did do research in undergrad. I kind of did a bunch of like different projects. So like I did a REU in non-Euclidean geometry, and then I did a small like semester-long project with a professor on campus, and then I did my senior thesis, which was also like research. And so the 3 professors that I worked with, I had them write my letters of recommendation, and that seemed to be like pretty good, at least in terms of like getting accepted to places. But I do think definitely like the most important part is to see like, do you actually like doing research? Like, can you study triangles for 8 weeks and like not lose your minds? Because when you're doing a PhD, you're gonna have to do it for like, I don't know, 3-4 years or however long it takes to write your thesis. So doing little, maybe like extended research projects, like I guess you probably have senior theses. That's a good way to see if like this is the type of thing that you would actually enjoy doing. And definitely like enjoying it. If you do like it, then like the things you write about in your letters will like be convincing, because that's like who you truly are. So I think that's important to consider.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, to stress the importance of the letters, like, I was at JMM last winter, which is like this big research conference. It's more of like a social event, but it's like huge, right? And so I had like a poster from the summer research I'd done, and one of the judges, he was like, "Oh, you're at Stony Brook?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, like I know one of the professors there." I'm like, "Oh yeah, he's writing my letter." And this judge was like, "Oh really? You should apply to the school I'm a department chair at." Wink, wink. And then I got in. I mean, like I didn't go there, but it's like kind of, you know.
I feel like we've sort of shifted the question away from specifically talking about research to talking about how research helps you get into grad school, which is more, I guess, the consensus is, because I agree with this too. I think that research helps in two ways. The first is making you sure that this is something that you want to be doing. And the second is developing a relationship with a professor or multiple professors who will be able to write you letters of recommendation. So in the sense that you're trying to build a resume, it might not be the best thing to do, but in the sense that it's the closest you can get in undergrad to sort of replicating what you might be doing in grad school, it's definitely a good thing to do if you're thinking about applying to a PhD program.
Thank you for those responses.
I had one more thing.
Oh yeah, sure.
I think your connection is weird, Tim.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Tim's having connection issues. Okay, so he's probably going to rejoin. So if he rejoins, I will let him say what he was going to say. But for now, let me shift the conversation to about what is a PhD anyway? So like, can you talk about what is like the timeline of a PhD? Like, what are you expected to do when? And like maybe there's some tests that you have to take at a certain time. Can you talk about that? And teaching responsibilities and all of this stuff. So like, what makes a PhD? What is a PhD? Oh, before that, Tim, do you wanna contribute what you wanted to say?
Yeah, sure. I'll make it quick. I just wanted to say that if you do your senior thesis like in the spring of your senior year, or if you're doing it maybe a full year, I don't know, just keep in mind that like this can hopefully I'm not frozen.
No, you're fine.
It's just good. The sooner you do your senior thesis, the better.
Okay.
The better the professor will know you, the better letter they'll be able to write.
Okay, thank you. All right, so next I wanted to ask the question about what is a PhD. So can you talk about the timeline of PhD, what you're expected to do, your responsibilities, teaching, research-wise, and like what tests you need to take and so on?
So it really depends on what the program is. Any program is going to have a different administrative structure for progressing you through the years of your PhD program. At Stony Brook, we have the comprehensive exams first, which are testing you on what we would consider to be like the required knowledge of any grad student going forward. And then once you do that, you find an advisor. You take an oral exam with your advisor, which doubles as a sort of contract between you and your advisor, where your advisor is now responsible for you for the rest of the program. And then the rest of your time as a grad student is spent working on problems and trying to write your thesis. So the two tests can take anywhere from a year to 3 years to complete. And then the rest of your time at Stony Brook, you have 6 years. So that means you're spending between 3 to 5 years doing research. The one caveat to that is that I think people tend to underestimate how long it takes to apply for jobs. And so you normally need to dedicate most of your last year to grad school to applying to jobs, especially if you're thinking about going the academic track. But what I want to add to that is that a big part of the grad program in math, which this is different from other fields, I think, is that you have a very close relationship with your advisor, and to a large extent, your grad program is the work that you're doing with your advisor. Like, that is the meat of getting a graduate degree. Getting a PhD as opposed to like a master's degree. And that being said, a thing to seriously consider is you need to be working with someone who you like to work with. So I've taken this question and I've sort of turned it a little bit, but this is something I think is very important and something that I think a lot of people right now don't think about too much because they get very excited about like, oh, I want to do this math and I want to work with this person. But if you don't like the person who you think you want to work with, it's not going to be a good PhD for you, because the PhD is in many ways just the relationship that you have with that person.
Thank you.
I would totally second everything that Emily has said. You know, when you're choosing an advisor, you're choosing a person, not just a subject. So on the topic of, you know, what is the PhD? Unless you're, you know, crazy talented like Karina. I'm just kidding. Well, no, I'm not kidding about sorry how talented Karina is. What I want to point out is that Karina has this GRFP, so she doesn't have to teach as much as the rest of us. Different programs will have different teaching requirements, and that's something that you should take into consideration when you're looking at, you know, schools that you're applying to, or if you do, or what school you might decide to go to after your acceptances come in, which I have no doubt that you'll all get acceptances. And so, like at the school I came from at Oklahoma State, the teaching load was higher for graduate students because there they had grad students for the most part would like teach their own sections of calculus or pre-calculus. So so the difference between how that is there and how it is here, you know, there's one big lecture, and then like us, like the grad students, we have to lead recitations. And so that means for each section where we're doing a recitation, it's like 1 hour a week in class, and then a little bit of grading on top of that, like for homeworks, and then also grading exams. But at Oklahoma State, you know, they were teaching 3 times a week each. Instead of having one big lecture for everyone, it was smaller groups of about 30 or so. each being taught by a graduate student. So that's definitely more work because you're meeting 3 times a week, probably for 2 classes or more. So yeah, the amount of teaching you have to do is different at place to place. Being a TA for Calc A, as I am right now, that's not much work at all because Calc A is sort of like the back of my hand at this point when you've been tutoring it and you've been teaching it. So yeah, I guess I just wanted to mention that teaching is part of the PhD usually, and to go over a little bit about what that looks like.
So at UMD, the system's a little bit different than at Stony Brook, because at Stony Brook, it's like the qual is like one giant looming test, right? And I don't know if you're allowed to take like any second year courses before you pass the first year ones. But at UMD, they're basically like, you have like an advisor that helps you like sign up for classes. But because the quals here, there's like one test like per subject. And so you need to pass 2 tests and then 2 other like specific classes with, like a good enough grade. And other than that, you can basically take whatever you want. Like, even like, for example, if you want to take the algebra test, you don't need to actually take the algebra classes. You just need to pass the test. So like, yeah, it's like very relaxed here. You can just take whatever classes you want, and the professors don't really care. They're just like, I mean, they do care, but they figure that you're like an adult at this point, and you know what you should and should not be taking. And so you're kind of just left to your own devices as far as like the classes you take. But there are deadlines that you need to hit for the quals. Like, you need to pass at least one of them by January of your second year, and you need to pass the second one by January of your third year. So you get a lot of time for the tests. So there's a lot of flexibility, but it's also like, you need to make sure you actually do this stuff, because, I mean, it's not unrealistic to get kicked out of a program if you don't pass the quals in time. As far as the teaching goes, I right now am only TAing a few times a week. So I spend 4 hours a week teaching a discussion session, which is like recitation. And I have 2 office hours a week, and I have to grade some homework. But the homework grading is pretty light, because I have like 50 students, and they submit like maybe 1 or 2 questions a week each. So it's pretty quick. And I guess the format of the classes is probably similar, where the intro classes are supposed to be very hard and torturous. And after that, it is basically like a free-for-all. Like, I'm taking like 2 intermediate classes right now, and you basically just do whatever you want. Homework doesn't matter, grades don't matter anymore. Professor is just like, okay, hey guys, what's up? How's it going? That's about it.
Okay, thank you. So we're kind of almost nearing the end. So at 8:50, we're gonna open it up to audience questions. So, I have a few more questions, but I have to pick one. So I guess, okay, this is something I wonder about. So how much does it cost to do a PhD? And yeah, finances and stuff.
Well, you're talking to a former econ major who knows all about opportunity cost. So the cost to doing a PhD isn't just any sort of financial situation. It's also what you give up not going into an industry job. If you are getting a math degree in undergrad and you do pretty well, if you're in a position where you're thinking about applying to math PhD programs, you can probably find jobs that will pay you between $50,000 and $100,000 a year just starting out. So that's a lot of money compared to a PhD salary, which is between 20 and 35,000 if you're like lucky. So just throwing that out there, some numbers.
Yeah, that over 6 years. So, or 5 if you're lucky. You know. So I'm hoping to be done in 5 because I'm not going into academia. If you are going into academia, then there's usually more of an incentive to like extend your PhD so you can like get more publications in before you graduate. But yeah, as far as the cost of a PhD, so when you if you do a master's program, oftentimes you're not funded unless you're being like also hired as a TA. For PhD, I mean, you have a tuition waiver, you have a stipend. So at Stony Brook, I want to say the stipend's around like, is it 23,000 or something? Okay, yeah. It's like 23K. And then because Stony Brook is the great institution that it is, they hit us with like $1,000 per semester student, like grad student fees, which really, from our perspective, just pay for things that the university wants, or they, you know, I don't know. They're not really for graduate students. They're, I think, more for their flair or to attract undergrads. So the fees suck. But does that answer? I think that's all I have to say about the cost.
Yeah.
This is a weird thing to think about, potentially, but when you become a grad student, you're getting hired by a university to do a job. So you are an employee in addition to being a student, which is different from an undergrad degree or even like high school or anything like that. That being said, one thing that you should definitely be concerned about if you're going to, I mean, for any job, but for grad school in particular, because this is something people don't think about, is what are the benefits that the school offers? Does it give you health insurance? Does it give you dental insurance? If you're making $25,000 a year or less, those bills can be really bad. And so you don't want to be stuck in a position for sure where you can't afford these things. So having insurance is really important. And we have health insurance at Stony Brook, which is part of the reason I decided to go here, actually.
Okay. So now I'm gonna let Julian voice the audience questions that we had in the chat throughout this whole thing. So Julian, if you even want to turn on your video, you can. But
yeah, sure, I'll turn on my video. I'm whatchamacallit, I'm washing my dishes as I've been listening, but also doing banal tasks as I've been. All right, so okay, so one question we have is from someone who just finished their BS in math and doesn't want to go into grad school, what other options do I have?
I don't honestly feel like I'm that prepared to answer this question, even though I'm planning on going into industry. So, but I will say, I guess for me, that I plan on doing some data science. So like basically just doing some problems related to like statistics and coding and math, like all sort of, I don't know. That's.
Does anyone else want to add anything?
I would say that you are not really limited in your choices. But also keep in mind that like at this point in your career, it's normal to not know what you want to do. And so if you're finding that you're at the end of your undergraduate career and you're like, I have these tools, but I don't know what I want to use them for, it's okay to get a job and plan to leave it 2 years later. Like, cycling through these jobs actually helps you build experience and build resume and build the connections that help you like further on in your career. So what I will say is, I don't know if any of us are qualified because we all chose to go into a PhD program to talk about your other options. But don't feel like you have to pick something and stick with it. You can change it up, go wild.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to the next question since there's quite a few of them here. This one's probably one that a lot of people are wondering is how would your letter grade affect your application to PhD? And like to be more specific, I'm wondering about some grad courses that might hurt my GPA.
I guess I could talk about this. I think that, I guess in terms of your question that you're thinking like, maybe I should take grad course, but I don't know if that would make my GPA worse and that'd be bad. The grad school application is pretty holistic, I think, so they don't just look at your grades. Actually, the grades are probably less important than like written things like your letters of recommendation and maybe also your personal statement even. And I think different programs like have different priorities, so maybe some of them would prefer strong grades over another thing, but having grad courses on your course list I think does help. Although I didn't take any grad courses when I was an undergrad because we didn't really have grad courses. But yeah, definitely taking advanced courses is good and also will probably help you more for graduate school because the first year classes are pretty difficult. And if you don't have a solid background beforehand, then it can be more difficult to get through those courses as well.
I would also, second what Karina's saying about that, if you're thinking about going to graduate school, you should probably opt for the grad class. I mean, I don't know the specifics of what you're looking at, so I can't say for sure that that's the call. You should definitely talk to people before you decide. But I'll say that in all of my like math classes that were like strictly undergraduate classes, so these are like not the classes I took my senior year, I had A's. I don't know if that's rare or not. But then so in my senior year, so in the fall, I was taking these two classes that were both, they're sort of joint undergrad and grad courses. That's sort of how we did it at Oklahoma State. And in one of them I got an A and in one I got a B. We didn't do like these sort of A plus, A minus, B plus like stuff. It was just A and B. And I actually use this in part of my personal statement to say like, this is my first B in a math class. I'm entering the spring semester. I feel very motivated to, work harder and, I'm like adding this as like a chip on my shoulder sort of thing. I don't know. You can maybe spin it if you do get a not as good grade. But I would recommend taking the more advanced class because it will help you be more prepared when you go to grad school, and it'll show universities that you have experience taking harder courses.
Okay. The next question is pretty long it's like specifically asked towards Emily and Tim. I'm not going to read all that now because I think that's a lot to address in the short time we have left. But like, I think the main question that this person is asking that will probably answer all their other questions eventually is, if you do algebraic geometry, can I have a little chat with you about stuff afterwards?
I definitely don't do algebraic geometry. I know I said that I was interested in that when I came here, but it's I can't even speak that language, so I'm not your guy.
I don't do algebraic geometry. The work that I do definitely has applications in algebraic geometry, and I know a very small amount of what's going on there. There is a part of this question that, is there sort of this marriage between analytic and algebraic approaches? And the answer is yes, and that's part of what I do.
Okay, and next question now is, okay, this one's good. How did you decide to go to a PhD program as opposed to a master's program? Or if you did get go to a master's program first, why did you decide on that instead?
I mean, like if you're gonna go to if you're gonna go to grad school for math, you may as well just kind of apply to a PhD because like they're funded and the masters aren't. And so it's like, would you rather pay for school or not? Also, it's like if you really hate your PhD program that much, you can just drop with a master's. And it has the exact same requirements as if you came into it looking to only get a master's. So you lose nothing by being a PhD student.
Okay, so now here's last question so far is, how do you approach professors about wanting to do research?
I guess I can answer this since I did a bit of research. So at least for the project that eventually became my senior thesis project, I was taking a course with the professor. It was an algebraic topology class. And I had been going to his office hours throughout the year and getting to know him. And he seemed like pretty open to doing research with students, and he like is known to do a lot of research projects and also like write papers with students. So basically after my final exam in that course, I was actually so absorbed in the test that like at the end I was about to turn it in and I realized I was the only person left in the class because everyone else was done. So I turned in my test and I just like asked him like, hey, like, would you be interested in doing research? And he was like, yeah. And so we ended up working together for basically the whole year after that, and then through the summer. So that's one way to do it, just like if there's a professor that you're taking a class with and you think they're cool and they do cool stuff, going to office hours with them and getting to know them, it's probably a good way to get started about trying to do research. You can also do like apply to REUs during the summer. That's probably another common way to do it.
So my advisor for my senior thesis, I had never spoken to him before, and I just emailed him like, hey, do you want to write a thesis with me? And he was like, yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, why not? Which, I mean, I got pretty lucky because he's like really friendly in general. But it's also like there was no one else at Stony Brook to write about that subject with. Because so my thesis was on translation surfaces. So there's not really anyone else I could have asked to do that. And then as far as like in the future, there was like a blog post I found one night when I was reading about some stuff, which is kind of like a natural generalization of translation services. And it referenced a lot of results by Bill Goldman and Giovanni Forni, both of which are at the University of Maryland, College Park. So I have a more or less clear direction to go in. I guess I should mention, I've been bothering Bill way more than Giovanni, because Bill does like a lot more geometry. So
Okay, and this is since we're kind of reaching our time limit here, this will probably be the last question. But just like yeah, so we'll wrap it up officially after this question, but then like you can stay to chat after if you want. So the last question we'll discuss like formally is which courses do you believe are necessary to have taken before beginning original research or research under a faculty member?
At least for me, the answer to that was 1 semester of abstract algebra and 1 semester of real analysis. So my first research experience was the summer after my sophomore year. And so I applied to a bunch of RUs. There's a website that has a list of all the research projects. And usually if you go there, it'll say like, we expect these prerequisites, and usually they'll have like at least algebra and analysis 1. And then maybe there'll be like additional coursework in X would be nice, but usually that's all you need.
I would say that it really depends on the subject that you're trying to research in. And I would also just try to say that, I mean, REUs are somewhat good at, I mean, I didn't actually do one, but my impression is that they're good at, you know, having projects for undergrads to like actually do research on. My research was, so I in my, you know, I became a math major fall of my junior year. This was the semester I was taking my first abstract algebra class, which was where my mind was like, I was like, whoa, math is so cool. And so this was like around the time I was also first thinking about like, do I want to go to grad school? And well, okay, I should probably do some research to like try to do research if I can to help answer this question. And so the professor who I was taking that course with he was doing algebraic combinatorics. And I think this was a subject that he happened to have a project that he thought I could help with. And it was just me sort of playing with some permutations. I mean, you don't need that much background to, he knew all this like deep math stuff that was like way over my head. And I was just sort of able to like come along for the ride and play with some permutations and, you know, write a paper together, which was an awesome success that I was happy for. But long story short, it depends. But you need to know how to write proofs, and you need a foundation in logic.
Okay, so I guess that concludes our graduate school panel. Thank you to all of the panelists for coming and answering our questions. If you want to stay, you can stay, but officially now it's over, so the recording should stop.